The Weld Like Bazza podcast is sponsored by MS Welding, the #1 welding solution provider. mswelding.co.uk.
Alan said before Callum came on, he went, what's your language you two?
Yeah.
So it's like a second dad. He's like,
it's
my new
not
dad.
easy though, is it? Because I've found now I swear more than ever. And some people, you know, they say, oh, when you have kids, you know, you'll intentionally, Yeah. When you have kids, you naturally just find yourself sort of curbing it. I don't
with Oliver, and especially now he's 15 and he's swearing more than me.
He's swearing more than you, but I think in a lot of ways it ends up being good for kids, because I think, you know, kids go out into the wider world, and if everything's flipping hell, you know, pardon me, it's not real life, is it? You know, I think when somebody can control it and use it in the right way and use it for effect.
Like when you're out on a bender with Andy Lomax. Exactly
that, yeah.
How is Andy? How's he doing?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, I mean, 2 Yorkshiremen working at a company that's based out of Birmingham. We've got people up and down the country, so me and him naturally, you know, we're the 2 token Yorkshiremen that I think every business has, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think after you guys popped in the other week to see me, I think I was having one of my insomnia nights where I'm laid in bed, can't sleep. I wake up and thinking about my dad. I went on Instagram, and I've only just gone back onto Instagram, and there was this video of this techno bus. Have you seen the techno bus?
No.
So I think it's European. It's somewhere in Europe, and it's like a proper bus, like a school bus, like you get to school, or like one that you get from Morley to Dewsbury on, right?
Yep.
Proper bus, proper Arriva bus or whatever. And they've turned it into a techno bus. So right up front, right where driver would be, there's like a cage and there's all DJ gear, and a massive sound system on it, right? And it's just like 140 BPM techno, and it's like this. But and like there's one security guard on. He stands right in front of the bus, like ticket inspector, and it's like banging. And I sent this clip to Andy Lomax, and when we go in, he said, "Next time it's in town, kid. Next time it's in town."
Yeah, I think that's a bit of Andy. Is that?
That's Andy. First time I ever met him, I'd never come across Andy in my life before, and we were doing his CP7 gas inspector's course at Lincoln. We just hit it off like an house on fire.
He's that kind of lad.
He's a top lad, isn't he?
I met him when I was working for GYS, and never met the bloke before, never heard of him before, and to be honest, we've ended up being really good mates now.
Because Andy worked at GYS as well, didn't he?
He did.
Engineer
so he was running the service department, and I was working as a demonstrator up and down the country, demonstrating welding equipment. And
was that your first demonstrator's job at GYS?
Yeah. So I did 2 years at GYS, and then opportunity came along for Bowler. And
so let's take it right back.
Yep.
On the podcast, we've spoke loads about the youth, getting people back onto pulling triggers and welding again.
Yep.
We spoke about that, and we spoke about who's young in the industry, who's really standing out, who's old in the industry, and who's got the wise words. One of the names that comes up really, really often of being one of the youth, but one of the very good youths in the industry is yourself.
Right.
One of the other ones is Callum at EWM.
Yep. I've met Callum. Really good guy.
Callum actually sends his regards. He said, I've got to say hello to you. We were going to try and get you to wear an EWM jacket for the whole podcast.
Step too far, that, mate.
Yeah. But we've got you in front of an EWM picture, so that's all right.
And you've got me with the EWM cup, so, you know.
So, I've got that. I've got that bit in. So you guys come up. Johnny comes up as well from EWM, but he's very behind the scenes. Is Johnny? He's not very forefront. He's very good at what he does, and I think he keeps himself to himself.
Yep.
I want to take it back. I think you're the youngest in the industry that I've known for the longest amount of time.
Yeah.
Piped Services, Bernard Bastow. That's
I was
where
thinking
it all
about
started.
it when I was driving up.
So tell me how it all started.
So for me, it wasn't a sort of straight line path into the industry. I didn't leave school thinking to myself, I want to be a welder. It's what I've always thought of doing.
Okay.
I actually, so when I first started, let's take it back like you say. So when I first left school, I actually went to sixth form. I was planning on being an English teacher, of all things.
Really?
That's what I No idea why. That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
I always had an interest in. I just always enjoyed putting words down on paper, and that just seemed like the natural thing to do. So yeah, left school, went to sixth form, studied lots of academic subjects. I did English language, English literature, history, and yeah, that was the plan. From there, circumstances didn't really sort of allow me to go down that path in the end. And what I mean by that is, as you know, when I was at sixth form, my older brother Sam, he was ill. He had cancer.
How old was Sam?
So Sam was 20.
And you was?
I was 15 when he was first diagnosed. So he was 19, going on 20. I was 15, going on 16.
Right.
So yeah, I were at sixth form. Big plans for myself. Sam got diagnosed, and that just sort of took me off on an entirely different path.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, I think things outside of sixth form were so intense for me that I just ended up not really having any interest in anything other than going out with my mates, playing in a band, just doing everything but thinking about anything serious.
And you and Sam were incredibly close.
We were, yeah, we were. But my neck, it's taking a serious turn right from the start, this, isn't it? So yeah, at sixth form, that was all going on. I just hit a wall where I thought, this ain't for me right now.
Okay.
So I ended up taking a job selling guitars in Leeds.
Whereabouts?
Up on Kirksall Road.
Whereabouts on Kirksall Road? PMT?
Yeah, PMT.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
So that was, at the time, amazing. Absolutely loved it, mate.
So I'm guessing you're a keyboard player then, yeah?
Keyboard player, yeah, and flute.
Clarinet on a weekend.
So ended up I'm working a job in Leeds selling guitars.
Right.
Gigging every weekend, going out with my mates. That was me. I was quite happy with that. That allowed me to just sort of separate myself from circumstance outside of, what had happened. The years sort of preceding that.
Sure.
So that was me for a couple of years, and then I had an opportunity from Pipe Services, who my dad was contracting to. My dad's been a welder all his life. He was a subcontractor.
Yeah.
Steve, yeah.
Afternoon, Steve.
My dad took me to one side one day and he said, look, you need to get real. You can't really be doing this for the rest of your life.
Right. So you had the chat with your dad, or he had the chat with you?
I had the fatherly chat.
Right.
And he said, look, why don't you consider welding? And at first, weren't really too interested.
Is that the point when I met you?
No. So at this point, cast it to one side, forgot all about it, and forgot all about welding for a good while.
Really? So how old are we now?
So at this point, I was sort of 17, 18.
Right, okay.
And then, I don't know, something just switched in me, and I thought, I do need to get real now. It became apparent to me I'm not going to spend my life touring the world.
Okay.
It's not really a career I can rely on. I ended up, I took an apprenticeship working alongside my dad up at Pipe Services in Leeds.
Right.
Fantastic company to work for.
Right.
To this day, it's, one of the best firms I've ever worked for. At the time, you don't always realise it. You've always got big dreams about going off and doing various things, and you don't always
the greener
realise.
The greener grass.
Exactly, yeah. And you don't always realise just how good you've got it. And, I look back on those years now. I did a 4-year apprenticeship.
Yes.
One of the best 4 years of my life.
And why was that, though? Why was it the best 4 years?
I think, and I think it's the same for a lot of blokes, a lot of girls as well. There's something really satisfying about building stuff.
I agree. Yeah.
And seeing something come together.
Yeah.
And I think especially with welding, it's something that, I think back to the first time I ever held a torch, and it's the most alien thing in the world.
TIG torch. Did you start on TIG because of your dad?
Started on TIG because, working at the company I worked at Pipe Services, that's all we really did.
Refrigerated.
Yeah, so it was stainless, carbon steel, mostly TIG, bit of MIG welding, bit of stick welding, but primarily TIG. And I think, building that skill set and then using that skill set to build stuff. We built everything that every aspect of the jobs that we took on, we'd make from scratch.
Even pipe cutting machines, even Bernard's very own pipe cutting machine.
Yeah, so the bloke that I worked for, Bernard, he had a second company called Prep-Right that made pipe cutting and beveling equipment.
Yeah.
So as an apprentice, I'd even spend time, even though it was primarily pipe work we were doing, I had experience doing sheet metal work, doing all sorts of different things, fitting work, drilling out and tapping holes, just general engineering. And I think that brings with it a satisfaction that not a lot of jobs do.
I think it gives you a very strong I can do mentality.
Exactly that.
But it's learnt, so it's not driven into you. You actually learn that you have a I can do attitude.
Yep.
And it takes you back to the kids with the Lego sets, doesn't it? Dad, do you want to? And Dad takes over, doesn't he?
Yep.
Dad builds the Lego.
I'll
show you how to do this. But if you let the kids build it with the Lego, ultimately they establish their very own I can do attitude.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really good about, especially in our job and our industry, and especially how I think things may go over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I think it's essential. I think it's an essential male attribute. And
I think it's something that's been sort of dulled down over the generations. I think, as technology's developed, people spend more time on computers, more time on phones. And I think that it's a skill set and an ability that people have forgotten about in a lot of ways.
Yeah, completely.
But I think I also think that's changing now. I think it's a generational issue in that so many kids have now left school over the years.
Can't do anything.
They've got no practical ability.
No.
No practical skill set. People buying houses, they can't do any DIY at
I
home.
want a new kitchen. Dad, can you come and fit me a new kitchen?
Dad, or they pay somebody else to come and do it.
Sure.
Yep. And I think that's something that's changing now.
People are wanting to do more themselves.
Yep.
And I think since the pandemic, once people realised that we relied an awful lot on things being brought in, that has also been looked at upon everything, hasn't it? So I've got a friend who grows all their own veg. Big Ollie, my best mate, Maya, his wife, grows everything. So they've got like various greenhouses, everything's grown. They want to grow their own stuff. They don't want to be reliant on co-op's delivery. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think also people realise in the pandemic that if you need something doing and a plumber's not allowed in your house, you're going to have to know how to do it yourself.
Yeah.
I'm really, really fortunate, as from this conversation, it sounds like you are too, that we've been given these skill sets. My dad helped me rewire my very first house, and he was like, this is how we're going to do it. And
let's be honest, knowing your dad and knowing you.
Right.
I feel sorry for any electrician that come into your house and take on that job.
a couple of years before he passed away, he actually employed somebody to come and do the electrical test on the unit.
Yeah.
He said, I haven't got time to do it this year, and I want to get somebody else in who's meant to be a professional.
Yeah.
They came in, they were like, well, they're an absolute shower of shite, weren't they? They didn't do that right. They didn't do this. They didn't know how to do that. He's blown end off my meter. And it was funny listening to me dad. And then I bought a house with my ex, and I said, right, this is how I'm going to rewire it. And he was like, that's a really good idea. And I was like, we're going to do it all on radials. We're going to do it on excessively big wire. We're not going to do it on a ring main, and we're going to do it. And I'm going to get it ready to rewire the entire house from the centre. And he was like, well, that's a right idea. And he came in, he did all my testing off before we actually got it tested off and signed off. Because there's nothing wrong with doing your own work as long as you get it tested off. And we did it all to the standard. And he was saying, you need stainless steel clips for that. You need and he was like, make sure it's 55 mil deep for your prep for your kit. And he was like, but that one my dad all over. He's sat right next to you now. He's listening to this conversation, having a right laugh.
Yeah, he's your dad all over, is that, mate? I think anybody who met him, anybody who knows you, that's not a new story to us.
It was so funny when he said, get that kettle on. He said, I can't watch them testing electrics here. It's doing me head in. I'm going to kick him out. And it's exactly how
this
he was.
Is, I think it's you're learning from a generation who want to do everything themselves.
Yes.
And obviously that rubs off on you, and you know, whether you realise it or not. I think in a lot of ways you don't realise it when you're growing up until you buy your own house, and it comes to you needing to do something, and you think, do you know what? I don't need to employ somebody else to do it.
I don't need to pay somebody
else
for that.
I'll do it myself.
Yeah,
and I'll probably mess it up a few times.
But making the mistakes is the way to learn,
and it's part of the satisfaction.
And it's like, I think as a parent, I remember it's been me and Oliver and his mum pretty much forever.
Yeah.
And being able to let them make the mistakes is a really hard thing to do as a parent,
it is.
Especially when you're as protective as I am.
Yeah.
But it works dividends, and and looking back now at this last year running the business on my own, and that's come with its trials and tribulations, but because of this, because I want to do everything myself. I want to do it all myself. I want to prove my dad right. I want to do him proud, and I'm like, my dad had done it all himself, so I'm going to have to do it all myself.
Yeah, and let's be honest, a lot of these jobs, once you actually get started on it, you doubt yourself. You're thinking, you know, is it something that I'm capable of doing? Because it's nothing that you've never done before. You've just always had somebody next to you.
Yeah.
You know, giving you that reassurance that if anything goes wrong, you know, you're not on your own.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I put an offer in on a house this week.
Yeah.
I'd have spoke about it extensively with my dad before. I'm in pieces before putting the offer in. I had to phone Simon, my mate from SWP. I was like, do I even put an offer in on this?
Yeah.
So is this the right thing to do? And he had to give me a proper dad talk.
Yeah. Because
I'd have had that conversation for like 3 days with my dad before I'd put that offer in.
Yeah.
And he ain't here. And that's shit. That's a tough one.
I can only imagine, mate. Yeah.
But back to where we started.
I think it's something that, you know, it's part of growing up, you know, and what I mean by that is, you know, you doubt yourself sometimes, and you're wondering if it's the right thing to do, and you think that other people, naturally you assume that other people around you just know whether something's the right thing to do or not.
Yeah.
And you realise, don't you, that nobody really has an idea. We're all winging it in some shape or form, and you've just got to follow your gut instinct, you know?
I thought about winging it other night when I nearly set that Moser in back room on fire with a gallon of petrol and a match. I'm like, I am winging this.
Yeah.
So apprenticeship, 4 years, Bernard.
Yeah, so I...
building stuff with your dad, building stuff with Bernard and Bernard's brother, Charlie.
Yeah. So Bernard had his... So funnily enough, Charlie wasn't his brother. I think Charlie just worked with him for so long that...
My dad thought that Charlie were Bernard's brother.
No. So Bernard's brother, I only met him a couple of times, Sean. He did work with Bernard quite often, but I can't say that I knew him all that well.
Right.
But Charlie, on the other hand, you know, I think he'd been there from the start. But that's what I really, part of what I really enjoyed about working for such a small company. You know, there was pipe fitting and welding company. You know, there were maybe 10 of us in total. Maybe 15 at the peak. At the peak.
And he got some big jobs, did Bernard?
Had some big jobs, yeah.
He definitely knew how to wing it.
And I think that in many ways that's why I really enjoyed it, because you know, it was a case of everybody getting stuck in. And, you know, you'll see in this industry there's always been a big thing about, you know, one man, one job. You know, you'll see people talk about if you're a welder, you don't get involved in the pipe fitting, and vice versa.
If you're a fitter, you don't touch your welding machine.
Exactly that, you know. And we never had the resource to be able to use that mindset, you know. So it were a case of, you know, one day you'd be welding, one day you'd be pipe fitting. You know, we'd be building pipe bridges. The next day we'd be drilling concrete and fitting them, everything. And I really enjoyed that, you know. And it gave me such a good grounding then when I left, finished my apprenticeship. And as you do, you know, you think that the grass is always greener. So, you know, I moved on, went to work for some different companies, and it gave me such a good grounding. Even to this day now, you know, I learned so much. And I think that's what a lot of people miss when they think about serving an apprenticeship. You know, they think it's a period of time that you've got to work on low pay, you know, and it's going to be boring and things only happen when you finish that time. For me, I thought it was the other way around, you know, the apprenticeship, you know, it benefits you in so many different ways. You know, outside of work as well as work, you know, it's, but as I say, I think that it's something that's changing in the industry now.
Yes.
You know, we visit so many companies now that are actually going old school now, and rather than trying to outsource the training to a third party, they're bringing it in-house.
Yes.
They're opening up their own training schools. They're employing people that have been there and done the job before to teach these young lads. Not just young lads, obviously. We're seeing more and more girls in the industry now, which can only be a benefit.
I agree.
You know, and, you know, I think that's going to be the key. I think it's companies taking the responsibility themselves and saying, let's not entrust this to somebody else. Let's do it. And let's train these people to do the job that we need them to do.
And I think about the people that I learnt from on my apprenticeship. They probably didn't have books and books and books of teaching qualifications, but they had years and years and years and years of experience of being in the tool room or being in the workshop.
Yep.
And that's what's missing. And that's something that I've picked up on, that in some of these training centres that are being built, I'd say over the past 20 years, and not all of them, but some of them, like I've said, the guys running the courses was just the guy who could do a little bit of welding better than everybody else and took on the job. And I look at that and think, is that an actual inspiration?
Yeah.
The inspiration comes from the people like I had, where the guy already ready for retirement, teaching you about the blue touch paper and touching off when you were doing your first mill, your first cut, and setting your speeds and feeds. But more importantly than all that stuff, how to clean your stuff down before you put it all away, before you went home in a night.
Yeah, just basic good practice, which is part of being a good tradesman.
Yeah.
You know?
Clean your tools up. Make sure you've got everything.
Yeah, take some pride in your environment, you know? And I think you can see when we go out to visit different customers and you see the older boys that are working in some of these fab shops, they've got ways of working that you just don't recognise in the younger guys because they've been taught from a very young age a lot of the old school mentalities, you know, about being in the trade. But again, we're starting to see that come back round. I think it's going full circle, which is, to me, it's fantastic to see, because we've spent so long now in the welding industry, you know, having this conversation about this shortage of welders, shortage of skilled guys. You know,
so you're seeing that as well. It's not just like people at Fronius and EWM. You're seeing that in the areas that and the sectors that you're working in too.
Down the country. And what's also interesting is when I speak to my colleagues who are over in Europe, over in the Middle East, everybody's having the same. Everybody's
even in
witnessing,
the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is when obviously a lot of these companies have got to start drawing the labour from other areas again.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that the issues when we talk about a shortage in skilled labour, it's not a local issue. It's not something that's just in the UK. You know, it's not just in Europe. It's global. It's
funny because I was listening to BBC. They had a bit of a debate last night. I think there was 4 of them on there.
Yeah.
And that's something that Labour was speaking quite highly about, the skill set.
Yeah.
And I've not heard anybody else. I'm not going political, but I've not heard anybody else speak about it like they did. And they were like, there's a skill shortage from everywhere, from absolutely everywhere, from the construction to our manufacture. There's a massive skill shortage, and it is big. It really is big.
I think it's, we mentioned it earlier, so many kids have left school, and I think about myself when I left school. You know, when I left sixth form and I told my tutors that actually I'm not going to university like I'd originally planned to do.
Right.
At that moment, the support switched off.
Yeah.
You know, it went from, you know, them wanting me in every day, wanting to know what you're up to suddenly, he's not going on to university, so there's no real need for you to be here. And at that point, you let loose and you think, well, you know, how many kids are leaving school in that situation where they've got no idea what they want to do with their lives? Mum
and dad's too busy putting food on the table.
Exactly.
You know, and the kids are already at that age where they're an adult. They don't really want to listen to mum and dad that much.
That's it. Yeah.
And that's a natural progression.
And I think that, you know, for that reason, apprenticeships have got to be offered as, you know, not a sort of a second choice if you don't want to go down an academic route. I think it's got to be offered as
a first
an
choice.
Option that's going to pay you good money. It's going to learn you good skill sets. And let's be honest, I think it's the same for most people who serve an apprenticeship, especially when you're young, you know, and you're at that time of your life. Your apprenticeship, it's some of the best years of your life.
Yeah, my one of my tech colleges, my dad sent me to two. You know what my dad were like, so we we're going to get value for money. So one day I were in Leeds City Centre, and one day I were down on Dewsbury Road, and that were great because we used to go to Broadway pub and have a pint on a night.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and we used to go Thursday nights.
Feel like a man.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, and then I ended up at East Street when I did my electrical. I were at East Street in their flats now. So what was East Street College? Their flats. So we'd nip across to. What's Cathedral? The church at bottom of Leeds. I can't remember it. Right down near
I'm
Coles.
not a Leeds lad, so I couldn't tell you.
Just at the other side of the road, there's a pub there. We used to go in there and have a couple of pints on as dinner. You know, don't come back pissed is what they'd say to you.
Yeah.
And everybody strolled in after
Everyone strolls in, and then an hour later, you're all napping.
Yeah. But I still passed with the highest possible grades I could. I enjoyed being there.
Yep.
And I think we recently attended a parents' evening at school with Oliver, and although apprenticeships were spoke about, and they did speak about it, it's not something that I saw all the parents in the room nodding their head at, and that sank a little bit.
Yep.
It was all about, let's get you on for higher education. You're going to do a T level, or you're going to do an A level or the equivalent or whatever. Or we're going to get you into another 2 years of learning so you can go to uni. They didn't, and they said, although an apprenticeship's an option, not many people go down that path, and that were categorically said. And that made me sink a little bit, because I just thought, especially looking at some of Oliver's mates, I just think some of these kids have probably got a really good skill set. You know, Jim...
That they're not aware of.
Yeah,
and they're never going to be.
Jim's dad, he's a machinist. He works at Sulzer's. They built a pub in the garden through lockdown, like a lot of people did. But Jimmy's obviously got a skill set where he really enjoyed building this pub with his dad. That is already a skill set that can be applied to an apprenticeship, to a job. You know, it doesn't mean he can slack off. Oliver keeps on giving him a telling off. You need to do some revision, Jimmy. But ultimately, it's these skill sets. And I kind of look at Jimmy and his dad and think, well done. Do you know what I mean? And getting Oliver in here, I made him help me do the sign. He's going to come in and start earning some pocket money. He's not interested in MS Welding. He wants to be a fighter, but
it might not be something he's interested in right now, but it's something that it maybe comes later in life. I mean, you know, I can only take myself as an example. I grew up being that kid that was always stood next to my dad, passing him tools, wanting to know what he were doing, and that obviously you hit an age where you discover other things. Let's just say, you know. And obviously
what age was that for you? Because I were a late starter.
Sort of 13, 14.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay.
You know,
although I were interested, I didn't really I didn't really sow any seeds until I was much older than that.
But you know, it's the same story though. You know, it maybe takes a back seat until you then, you know, you get to a point in your life where you do start thinking about what you want to do with yourself.
Changing the battery with your dad on the car.
Yeah.
I remember doing that. And I think it's something, Oliver's never changed the battery on the van.
No. You know, I've got to be honest, it's not something that I've ever done.
Right,
and my dad riles me for it.
Really?
Yeah, you know, changing a tyre.
How many RAC sort of and AA cars do you see at the side of the road changing
this is it, you know,
a bloke's tyre?
Maybe I'm part of the problem, mate.
Right, okay.
You know, but...
we'll address that later.
You know, but you know, the point that I'm trying to make, I guess, is that, you know, it's circumstance, you know, and I think that it's a case of trying to make the resource available when people hit that time where in the life where they think, maybe I do want to learn a skill set.
Yep.
Where it's easy for them to access it.
I agree.
You know, it's the best thing that I ever did with my life.
Amazing.
I can honestly say that, you know, and it sounds a bit lame saying that, but, you know, I look back at everything that I've got in my life now, and it all stems back to serving that apprenticeship and learning that skill. You know, all the mates that I've made along the way, the satisfaction I've had out of doing the job that I do now, and, you know, all the jobs that I've done previously.
So you left Bernard.
Yep.
Where did you go after that?
So I went to work at One Subsea, or Cameron's in Leeds.
Okay, and you were there for how long?
About a year.
Working under who? Who did you work under?
Various people. So that was like a big turnaround for me, because I went from working for an independent privately owned company, 10, 15 of us at the max.
Right.
To suddenly working in a fab shop where you had, I bet, 500-600 people on the shop floor.
Right.
Probably the same again in the offices. And again, it was an eye opener for me, because you realise that, you know, there's a big wide world out there, and some of the opportunities that you can sort of experience and that you have access to by getting out there.
And what kind of projects did you work on at Cameron's?
So at Cameron's, it was all subsea Christmas trees, we called them.
Yep.
So the Christmas trees are the big valve that essentially sits on the well subsea. It's what controls the flow of oil and everything else that comes up.
Yeah.
We were building trees for everywhere in the world, really.
Okay.
We were doing work for BP, for Shell, so many different, big companies that, you see the petrol stations when you're driving down the road.
Yep.
You don't realise how much infrastructure is actually sat behind that.
Yeah.
And how much money you can make being a part of that infrastructure,
right.
Being in that supply chain,
So one subsea, Cameron's from there?
Yep. So from there, Cameron's got closed down.
Yeah, so what happened? What was the whole logistical situation there?
So you've got a site you've got a company that was working from that same site for over 100 years at that point.
Right.
Very profitable business, as I understand it.
Really big employer for the area?
Big employer, yeah. You had guys that had been there over 40 years, that served their apprenticeship there, that retired there. And there was a big decision made abroad. I don't believe it was taken in the UK for them to consolidate the business.
Right.
So again, this is how I understand it. I was working at the time on the shop floor, so you only get given so much information. But this employer with over 1,000 people on site, building really high, highly specified, really good quality products.
Yeah.
It was closed down overnight.
Is it true that basically people walked in on the Monday morning and everything had been skated out over the weekend?
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
So that left you where?
So that left me with a bit of egg on my face, really. And what I mean by that is, you always think the grass is greener. And I think, you think that going to work for these companies that look glamorous, and it looks like everything's set for you.
Perfect.
Not always the case.
Right.
You've got to know when you've got it good sometimes. So I found myself not really knowing what to do with myself, and that's when I went self-employed. And
is that where the Instagram picture came from, where you had like a 4-meter piece of copper pipe pretending to put the TIG route in?
So at that point, then that's when I decided to chase the money.
Right.
And again, that's another lesson that I learned in this industry. For the people that really want to get out there and give it both barrels, the money's there to be earned.
Right.
If you know what you're doing, I'm not saying that I necessarily did, but if you've got the balls to go out and do it, and like I say, give it both barrels, the money's there to be earned.
Demand your skill set, demand the money.
Exactly that. Yeah, so I did that, I think, for 2-3 years.
Right.
And that's when the opportunity came along. I ended up going to GYS after that.
So how did that happen?
That was a random message on LinkedIn that I had from my old manager.
Okay.
Didn't really know what I was letting myself in for.
I remember your first ever visitation to MS Welding under the GYS badge.
Yeah, that's it. Which, it's always strange, and I still find it strange now, not just with MS Welding, but in general. When I go into businesses that I contracted for when I was working as a welder, to go back in on the other side of the fence, not as somebody who works there, but as a supplier.
Right.
It's still a very strange experience, because, you going from just going in there to do a job, and switch off at 5 o'clock when you walk out of there, to suddenly going in and you're trying to advise these people.
Yeah.
So, went to GYS.
Met Andy Lomax.
Met Andy Lomax, yeah, for all my sins, couldn't get away quick enough. I'm sure he'll appreciate me saying that.
Yeah, he will.
Spent 2 years there. Really good grounding for me. I spent 2 years as a welding demonstrator, just, out on the road, equipment in the back of the van, just demonstration.
Up and down the country.
Up and down the country, and loved every minute of it.
What happened then?
That's when, I've got to be honest, I remember seeing there was an article that went up online about Bowler Welding, this company that, if I'm honest, I didn't know a huge amount about.
Right, okay.
I'd worked at GYS with Stuart Powelsland, who was ex-bowler over in South Africa. He'd told me all about his exploits over there, mentioned bits about Bowler Welding. And I'm reading this article about this huge welding consumables manufacturer getting into welding equipment.
Right.
And that's when, the light bulb moment happened for me, because I thought, well, a welding consumables business getting into welding equipment, that's surely, from an individual perspective, they're going to need welding equipment people. That's a big opportunity.
Okay.
And to this day, it's again, you look back and you see certain things, certain decisions that you make, and you either thank yourself for it or you don't. Coming to Bowler, one of the best decisions I ever made.
How old were you when you took that step from a very large, growing French company, GYS, to Bowler? How old were you?
Been there 5 years now, so I was 25. Quite young.
And you've gone from...
that probably goes without saying for a lot of people, but for me, I look back and, 25-year-old, I thought I knew everything.
Right.
Obviously, that wasn't the case.
Right.
To this day, that's not the case. But I look back at how much I've grown from as a result of working for that business. How much you learn from being a part of this huge machine. It's incredible when I look back. I look at the different projects I've been able to get involved in.
And is that projects that you wouldn't have been able to get involved in by staying at GYS?
Naturally, yeah, but purely because a company like Bowler, the different industries they're involved in, welding consumables as a business gets you involved in so many things that just working on welding equipment, it's not, you can't necessarily do, and I think that's been part of why I've enjoyed so much working at Bowler, because people in the welding industry, they talk about welding solutions. Welding solutions is it's a term that's bandied about a lot.
I was saying it before. Anybody else jumps on that bandwagon?
Yep.
I'm gonna think of a new tagline now.
Yeah, well, yeah, mate. It's so heavily used now.
I am going to change my LinkedIn profile after this. No longer the #1 welding solutions provider.
But that term is used so often now. And when I really look at what we do at Bowler, I don't think there's many companies out there that really sort of bring it together in the way that we do now. And right. I think from a personal perspective, that's been such a big learning curve for me, because, as I say, it's got me involved in so many different projects.
So what kind of industries have you worked in the last 5 years that you hadn't had the opportunity to work in up until that point?
Previous to that, so I look at some of the customers that we've managed to get into, you look at aerospace customers.
Right.
With some of the requirements, yourself.
Yeah,
the
sure.
requirements that some of these businesses have.
Yeah.
From the welding is just, it blows your mind, the detail.
So what aerospace companies have you managed to get into? Are you allowed to say?
I can't say on the podcast simply because I don't know if I'd have the permission to.
Right, okay. But we're talking high-end stuff.
We're talking some high-end stuff.
Yeah.
We look at a lot of the companies that are supplying product now to the MOD.
Right.
That's been some really interesting work for us.
And you get in there with the consumable side of it first?
One or the other.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's been the equipment that's given us the opportunity for the consumables, and then vice versa as well.
Nice.
But, as I say, I'm talking about this from a personal perspective at the moment.
Yes.
Because, for me as a young lad in the industry, the more opportunities I can have to get in and see these customers and see what they're doing, a lot of the time, you're not advising them on how best to carry out a project, because, how can you? you know, when you don't fully understand the intricacies of what they're doing, but
and you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to know. You're not allowed to know in some instances. You're there. You've got a gun to your head, and you're told exactly what they want from you, and that's all you're told. Yeah. And I think it's a little bit inspiring on that journey home afterwards, and you think, have I just done that?
Yeah, you've been exposed to a world that you didn't really know
doesn't
existed.
Exist. Doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And once you leave the gatehouse, it doesn't exist anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's so segmented. You find out a little bit about what you need to know, and that's it.
And that's it. Yeah. But that is the beauty of it. You know, I'm sure some people will laugh when they hear this, but you talk about, you know, how interesting the industry is, the welding industry. You know, like we say, some of these customers that you get in to see, and you look at the work that they're doing, and it does blow your mind in a lot of cases, whether it's the scale of what they're working on, literally how big some of these projects are, or whether it's the application, what these things are being built for, and to play a part in that, however small, you know, it's always been really interesting for me. It's always it's what's really sort of kept that fire in my belly going. You know, that motivation to get up on a morning, you know, and get out the house and go and do what we do.
One of the things that's always kind of enlightened me, and kind of when you wake up the next morning you look back at the day before and you think, did that actually happen?
Yeah.
Is some of the spontaneous, instantaneous things that have happened that were completely out of my control or Dad's, like somebody's just walked in, somebody's wandered in with a story or a situation, and you find yourself in a completely different world in about 3 minutes. And then afterwards, like the guy leaves and me and Dad would be stood there going, did that actually happen? Have I actually seen that? Have I just heard that story? So welding and the welding industry is not a boring, old-fashioned industry whatsoever.
No.
And I want to take it away today from that, you know, that VR kind of welding situation, that automation, that robotic situation. I want to talk about it from a hands-on, torch in your hand situation. It's definitely not boring.
It's not, mate. It's really not. I think, you know, anybody who knows me knows that, you know, I got into the industry through my dad. You know, my dad that gave me the boots up the arse and said, you know, it's time to do something.
You're like the Yorkshire Geordie Shore, like that, you?
Oh, I don't know about that, mate. I'll let somebody else decide that.
Callum.
But, you know, I remember speaking to my dad, and he told me about the first Gulf War and the American ships that were sailing past the UK out to the Gulf. And him and a team of lads getting flown out there to work on the boilers for these ships. The boilers had blown. The ships couldn't sail. You know, and he's telling me these stories about, you know, going down into the boiler rooms, into the plant rooms, walking past rows and rows of tanks, A-10 fighter jets, that sort of thing, you know, and stuff like that. You know, it sort of ignites your imagination a bit, doesn't it? You know, and it gives you that inspiration. And it's as I say, you know, I'm sure a lot of people will think how lame to think that the welding industry is so interesting, but I think when you really get involved in it and you see, you know, how many applications welding sort of gets you involved in, it's not for everybody, but for those of us that are in it, I think
there's more and more females coming into the industry. I think something that's held just a I was thinking about the podcast today and a few things that I wanted to kind of bring to light. I said to somebody that's been in the industry forever, maybe 10 years ago, is your son coming into it? He went, no, he's going to go work at a call centre in British Gas. There's loads of females in there. He's going to, you know, have a great time. He's going to be out with lads after work. He's going to be able to chase some women. He's going to get himself in a relationship. He don't want to be coming into this industry. I think that's really short-sighted.
Yeah,
fair play to him if he wanted to do that. I think there's places to meet females now as a bloke. But ultimately, some of the top engineers, the metallurgists, the health and safety officers, the people that are coming into the industry, they're female as well as male.
Yep.
There's a really good opportunity to meet somebody in the working environment now that never existed before because of all these other opportunities that are coming to light.
Yep.
I'd like actually to see a younger female working at MS Welding in the future, either on the demonstrating side or definitely on the counter side, really, really fronting the ship. I don't have a daughter to bring into the business. I've only got Oliver. So, we're going to have to recruit.
That's why it's interesting for me now, because my daughter Liv, she's 6 years old.
Wow.
And
6.
I think having a girl as a bloke, I grew up, there were me and my brother.
Right.
I didn't grow up around, having sisters and cousins who were girls and everything else. So in that respect, I had a bit of a one-sided view of the world,
Yeah.
Having a girl changes that view, because suddenly the idea of, your daughter maybe having doors closed to her because she's a girl. Suddenly you start to take very personal offence at the idea of that, don't you?
She might be better at our job than we are.
Exactly
and
that.
she's got every single right to jump in and pull the trigger.
Exactly
and
that.
get the soldering iron out. And
it's how you make it accessible and how you make it attractive to them.
Is that something that you're working on at Bowler, like being inclusive? And you spoke about, you've had some really good opportunities at Bowler these last 5 years, the places where you've been, the places where you've worked, the insight that's given you is a whole new level. And I'm sure you've got years of new insight coming, especially at the level that you're currently operating at, which is an extremely high one. You're doing really well. Do you think as a company at Bowler, you're going to start, moving forward towards helping people get involved in the industry? Is that something you spoke about?
I think it's something when these people are applying for the jobs and when they're putting themselves forward naturally, I think I think the key thing for me is that when you've got a job opening and when you've got an opportunity to employ somebody, it's about giving it to the person who is the most qualified to do that job.
Yep.
Whether it's a bloke or whether it's a woman.
And also,
and I think that's
the person with the most amount of fight for it, the one who wants to who's going to continue to fight for it. And I think it's something that we miss. I think there's too many people that I witness on a daily basis are ready at 10 to 4 when they're clocking out at 4 o'clock. They're stood by the clocking out machine.
Yep.
That's not an option. Just give me a second. Don't be laughing and getting involved in conversation, Gordon. So where were we? What did we just say?
Women in welding.
Other thing is as well, and it's funny that Gordon's just walked in and interrupted everything, but back in Gordon's day, being a plumber, they're only men, got involved in plumbing.
Yep.
I think now we're at a point where we've got such a skill set that's missing, involving people. And you saying, like you say, Bowler, inviting people in, giving them those opportunities, growing as a business. Because you're massive, aren't you? You're a really big business when it comes to the physical size of Bowler's huge.
I mean, you look at, especially when you then scale out again to Voestalpine, who are our parent company.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number, but I know that it numbers in the tens of thousands of people that work for Voestalpine.
So did they start out as a consumable only business?
No. So Voestalpine were a steel business. We've been involved in the steel business for right from the start.
Right.
So
making steel. Yeah.
So we were primarily a steel business.
Right.
That became then involved in Bowler Welding.
Right.
There's been that many iterations of Bowler Welding over the years. Before my time, I can't remember the name of. I don't know what they were called before Bowler Welding. But yeah, Voestalpine were involved with Bowler at one point, and then it grew to a stage where they actually bought Bowler and became the parent business.
There were I go to a place in Barnsley, and I condemned a machine a few years ago. It was a Voestalpine welding machine.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the only ever ones I've come across, orange.
Yeah.
And it were great, but
I've heard sort of rumours about Bowler doing or Voestalpine doing welding machines in the past. Never come across them before.
Yeah, I've only ever come across one in the UK.
But I've got to say, having that involvement from Voestalpine as a parent business, them as a steel manufacturer, you can imagine the amount of experience and the amount of sort of knowledge that they can bring to us as a welding consumables business. Yes. I mean, you take, for example, I remember being over in Italy at the cord wire factory that we have,
right,
and speaking to one of the guys there, and he was telling us that the strip that we use, the raw strip that we use to make our cord wires, is a particular grade that is produced by Voestalpine for bowler welding. They don't supply to anybody else, and it's a specific chemistry that's been developed specifically for that wire.
Run me through the process of that particular product, because I've heard it's quite magic.
It is, yeah. When you talk about so for us, our range is called the Diamond Spark wire.
Yeah.
So what we mean by that is a hermetically sealed welding wire, something that isn't exposed to moisture. So the way that we do that, and like you say, it is pretty incredible when you see it from start to finish. It starts out as a strip. That strip's then folded, turned into a tube, and that tube.
So this strip can't be that big. You know, we're talking about.
You'd be
this
surprised,
is
and this is the beauty of it.
It's going to be 1.2 minimum diameter, 1.6 maximum, is it? Or do you go to 2.4?
So it actually starts out as I couldn't tell you exactly, maybe 30, 40 mil.
Yeah, but we're talking it's going to become a 1.2 mil or 1.4, 1.6 welding wire, aren't we?
Even 1 mil.
You do a 1 mil, right? Okay.
Yep. So starts out as a strip. We then form that into a tube. That tube is then welded.
Right.
So we use a laser welding process to weld that tube.
Right.
At this point, the tube, we're talking 1/2 inch diameter.
Right.
It's like the tube I used to weld when I was on the tools.
Right.
It's big. And from that point, then that's when we fill it with a flux, or with the powder that turns it into a metal cord wire rather than a flux cord wire. And it's at that point then that we actually vibrate the filling into the wire.
Right, and that's so we don't get pockets, we don't get gaps.
That's so that you don't get pockets, yeah. And this is where, you know, when people talk about the quality of different wires, this is where wires really start to differentiate themselves.
Okay.
So we can guarantee that 100% of our wire is being X-rayed.
So
as it leaves the
do you
factory.
X-ray it in process?
In process.
Okay.
So the moment that X-ray detects a pocket,
Stop.
emergency stop. Yep. Cut it. Find out why that's happened.
Have we got a problem in the machine?
Fix the issue. Carry on. And that's, as I said, you know, that's when we're out demonstrating our wires, the amount of times in the past you run a flux cord wire, and out of nowhere, you know, you get an explosion in your wire. The arc goes out.
It feels like the wire's either retracting, or you think you might have blown something out of the plate or something.
Yep. And it isn't. It's because you've got, you know, that pocket of non-filled wire that's come through. You know, in 5 years working at Bowler, I've never had that. You know,
and a metal cord wire of that standard is going to be used in so many heavy industrial applications, shipbuilding.
Yeah.
So what's the advantages from your point of view? Not talking about machines, but that particular product. It's probably a little bit more expensive than everybody else is on the market, but it's made in a very exclusive way.
Yeah,
and it's a very exclusive product.
It's the usability, which is, you know, why you would potentially pay more money for ours than a seamed wire.
Right.
So let's take, for example, a company that's working in a big fab shop. They've got 20, 30 welding machines going day in, day out, and they're running a flux cord wire.
Yeah.
Every night, the welders switch off the machine.
Yeah.
He walks out of the shop, goes home, does what he does, comes back in the next morning. That reel of welding wire it's been exposed to moisture overnight, and obviously that moisture then penetrates into the wire, penetrates into the flux, and that's when you end up having issues like wormholing.
Yeah,
we see this all the time. We go out to customers that are complaining. I put the wire on the machine, it welds perfectly. Come back a couple of days later, it's not welding the same. I don't understand it. Something wrong with the wire. So, you know, we go out there, we take our seamless wire with us.
Right.
This seamless wire that's hermetically sealed. It's a welded welding wire.
Right.
We put it on the machine. They use it. Come back a week later.
Can't be penetrated. Perfect. Brilliant.
Exactly. And that's, you know, again, you know, people talk about solutions in the industry. That's a very small part of a wider solution that we can offer as a business. And as a nerd, somebody that enjoys welding as a as a topic. That's such a cool thing for me to be able to offer to a customer.
The Titans have got the option of a heat plate that actually you buy as an optional extra onto the wire feed unit.
Yep.
So you put your expensive wire on there and you're not going to use it until the next shift.
Yep.
But you can keep it at the right temperature within the housing to make sure that it's perfect for the next day.
That's it.
Nice little invention from EWM, is that?
Makes sense. Obviously, not all wires can be produced as a seamless wire. So, this is it. You talk about solutions. Do you
remember Ollie? Sadly passed away a few years ago.
I know Ollie really well.
Ollie, the best welder in the world ever.
We worked together for a good few years. Did. So, I knew Ollie really well.
He invented a bag with a heating element in, didn't he?
Yeah, I remember that.
Did anything ever happen with it?
Ollie being Ollie, I think he gave it so much attention and then his focus moved on to something else.
Bless him.
Probably bought a new car or something and forgot all about it.
But he had this great idea about having this bag. Yeah. It was like a record bag.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, I remember the prototypes that he had produced in bringing them into work. So we were trying to get businesses to buy it. I think he were trying to get wherever we were working at the time to invest in a couple of bags.
I remember you'd phone Ollie and he'd go, Ollie, best welder in the world ever. I'm currently just doing a weld, so I can't answer the phone.
Yep.
Leave a message. Bless him.
Is one of the most divisive blokes that I've ever met. From a work perspective. He knew that he was good. He were cracking lad, really good at what he did. But it were only when you met him and you knew him in person that you really understood just what a good guy he was, what a brilliant bloke he was.
Do you reckon
speak to anybody who actually worked alongside him, putting aside all the comedy that used to happen online on LinkedIn, you speak to anybody that actually worked alongside the guy, fantastic bloke. Do anything for anybody.
Do you reckon he's having a sandwich and a cup of tea with my dad?
Without a doubt.
You reckon, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know who's got command of that conversation, because I think both of them liked a good chat, didn't they?
They'll be talking about what welding machine's best.
Yep.
And who's done what. They probably get on really well now.
Yeah.
Now they're up there looking down on us.
Yeah.
Bless him. Because he was young, wasn't he? He was young,
a young guy, yeah. Yeah, I think he was mid-30s when he died.
Yeah, really young.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, looking at where you've come from, in a very short period of time, working for such a global institution on such a high level. So what's next? Where we're taking things next?
Mate, I've got 2 kids, a mortgage, a lot of stress. For now, I honestly...
so what's in line at work, though? What's going on at
work? So, when you look at where Bowler are as a welding manufacturer, we're 5 years into
machines,
really seriously offering welding equipment as part of our portfolio.
Is that 5 years already? 5
years.
Are they basically now? Sorry to interrupt, but are they Selco machines in blue, or is it a new machine?
It's one of those misconceptions that you hear again banded about on the market.
Welding industry is great for its own rumours.
Yeah. When I first started at Bowler, my line manager for Northwest Europe, Enrico, he's the son of the founder of Selco.
Okay.
So you can imagine, some of the stories he can tell you, about running a business like that, but some of the experience that you can learn from people in that situation as well. You look at Bowler as a company, the amount of experience and knowledge we've got in the business, primarily from a consumables perspective,
sure.
But in general, welding experience, you can imagine what happens when you combine the two.
Yeah.
When Bowler start to inject that experience. And again, that's where it's been interesting for me, because when we talk about solutions, when we walk into a customer that's either taking on a new project, they're having an issue with an existing project, and they ask us to help them solve that problem.
Being a solutions provider,
yeah. You look at the different directions that we can come at it from, whether it's the wire, whether it's the machine, whether it's the process, whether it's an amalgamation of all of it, into one,
So all this aside of what you can offer,
Yep.
And you're working with these machines now, which you're thoroughly involved with.
Yep.
Do you remember your first ever true synergic machine that you had to go with?
I do, mate.
Can you just tell me what colour it was?
It was, I can tell you exactly what model it was.
Right, go on then, tell me.
It was an EWM Alpha Q 350.
330.
330.
Compact.
Yeah, I remember it well.
Who what porky little demonstrator that brought that out to you?
I can't remember his name. Yeah, I've forgotten, mate.
So at that point, you'd only really done TIG welding.
Yep.
And then you made that transition. And what were your thoughts at that point? I remember a comment, and it stays really clear.
You know, it's the same. I had the same mindset as what we now experience with our own customers, as I experience with customers.
Tell me
now.
what you said to me, because you were a kid. You were a kid, and I wasn't much
Honestly,
older.
mate, I can't remember.
Are these a bit of a gimmick? These machines. There's a lot of people say that these machines are a little bit of a gimmick.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you said.
It doesn't surprise me.
And now, working with global company,
it's a symptom of what we see all the time in the industry, which is that people are scared to change.
Yes.
People want to see change, but they're scared to change themselves and to be a part of that change, you know?
I think this new generation of people that hopefully people like myself, you, Andy, Callum, EWM, people at Fronius, all the big players, when we get the younger generation in, the one thing that we're not going to see in the future is that conversation and that mindset, because they're going to be straight in at the very top end of all the technique. Even the technology now that you buy, the cheaper stuff, synergic and semi-synergic.
It's true, yeah. And it's something that welding manufacturers rightly recognise. It's something that they've got to invest in, because... You know, we walk into a customer that's looking at a new welding machine. You're usually given maybe two guys to work with on that demonstration. You might be given the older boy who's been at it a long time, knows what he's doing.
John.
And then let's call him John. And then you get given his young understudy, you know, the lad who's not been at it a long time, but he's keen as mustard, you know, and he wants to be involved. Frenzo. Let's call him Frenzo. John and Frenzo.
Brilliant.
You know, and... You see it every time, not without fail, but most of the time you see it where the young lad straight into the machine, wants to know everything that it can do, wants to mess about with the interface, get into background menus, that type of thing. The older boys out there just want to get on with it.
That same situation as when I first told Mr. Clark here, sat in this chair, that I was going to replumb my house in push fit. and they were like, well, you know, I've heard it's all right, but, you know, you can't beat soldered joints.
That's it.
It's all crimped.
Oh, there we go. Got a word out of him.
You're behind with the times already, mate.
I am, yeah. I'm well behind the times.
It's all crimping now, mate.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's...
This is it. And you don't trust... You don't trust a lot of these processes and a lot of these products until you see it for yourself, do you?
Went to soldering, and then... They used to have Conex, which were cones coming on, and then they designed a tool, which was a swaging tool.
Yeah.
Which you used to put into your copper end, put your nut on.
Yeah.
And swage your copper out.
Yeah.
And then it made the joint when you put it together with a bit of paste, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what they did.
Yeah.
And now it's come back to crimping. You buy the crimping. It's come from France or somewhere like that.
Yep.
You know, they were doing out airlines and that, you know, so...
But in terms of welding equipment, I think, you know, the step forward and the younger generation getting right in there with that technique.
Yep.
The old guys always have this misconception of, I'm not going to be able to tweak it how I want it to work.
Well, I always remember, you know, it sums it up really well. I remember starting working at a company called AJ Fabtech in Dewsbury. And they'd just invested in a load of, I bet they had 20, 25 of them at the time. This is going back to about 2015. A load of synergic pulse MIGs.
Right.
And I always remember one of the old guys there saying to me, he says, don't bother with any of that. He says, you want it on this. And he put it into manual mode.
Callum spoke about this, didn't he?
Yep. And the guy says to me, he says, I don't need no welding machine telling me what to use.
And it's that mindset.
We still see it now, and I always, if the person's interested, I always make a point now of trying to explain that, look, buying a synergic machine, buying a synergic pulse machine, this isn't us trying to tell you how to do your job. This is us trying to give you, more advanced tools to make your life that bit easier. Whether it means taking away less spatter afterwards, whether it means less time messing about with the machine, And
it costs millions of pounds to produce a synergic curve.
It does.
And then I know that Bowler do it differently. So you produce a synergic curve for your own wires.
We do. Well, yeah, we come at it from both angles. So we produce the generic curves for generic wires. And then naturally, Bowler being involved in so many different sort of speciality products.
Yeah.
Naturally, you can't apply a generic curve to weld a non-generic wire.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's
I agree with that.
That's the beauty of it. We can now offer, if somebody's taking a 700 grade steel, we can offer a curve that matches that perfectly.
For that gas.
For that gas.
For that machine.
Yeah, so, ABC Welding down the road are welding a 700 grade steel. We can supply the wire that's matched to that grade. We can supply a machine with the correct process, with the correct curve on there.
Because if you didn't have the machine, you would have to probably bend a synergic curve that exists, which that's not the wrong way to do it.
Yep.
But it's a little bit easier
It's
if you've got a very specific wire.
Yeah.
And you've got a very specific curve.
Yeah.
I know that.
And don't get me wrong, Barry. When we talk about this, it's not me. I don't want to come across as I'm trying to, sell the product itself. It's more that, for me as an individual, I am a bit of a nerd, and I do find those topics interesting. And when a customer says to me, why should I buy from you and not from somebody else? It's these little sort of
little things that are different,
and
unique
points. Yeah, that when you tell somebody work with us, you can really feel it genuinely that you mean that, and you're not saying it just because you want to make a sale. So, and I like that. I like knowing that when I go into a customer's, I believe in what it is that we're offering.
You're not a salesman if you believe in it. You're there out of honesty.
Yep.
Chop me in two. You know what it says on both sides.
It's true.
In you likewise. That doesn't mean that I dislike any Bowler products, because that's far from the truth. It's you learn to believe in the stuff that you've had good success with as well.
Yep, it's true.
And I've had really good success with the products that I back.
And that's why people come back to you.
Yeah.
Because they trust in what you tell them.
And
it's not always that you're telling them what they want to hear. It's not always that you're telling them that you can solve the problem that they have, because often you can't. It's something that's out of your control.
They're the hard conversations to have, because people don't want to hear it.
Yep.
And my upbringing with my dad never wanted to turn around to somebody and say, I'm not doing that, or I can't do that. I've had to do it this week.
Yep.
In the process of nearly setting that Moser on fire with a couple of gallon of petrol and a match and and you've sometimes got to turn around from the level of the business and say, I am not doing that. Because you're asking for something that's either uneconomical to you or doesn't fit within my moral standard. And I think that comes from growth. At 22 years old, you want to do everything, don't you? You're not scared of doing it all, and you want to stick the twos up at absolutely everybody.
I think it's a mixture of wanting to stick the twos up, but it's also an element of people pleasing as well. You don't want to be that guy that turns around and says no, because you think that that's you not doing your job. When you learn as you do the job, and as you grow up, and get older and wiser.
You want to turn around and say, actually, do you know what? I need to be honest with you. From my point of view, not yours. I'm not doing it for you.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Take it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the long run, you look back, and a lot of the time when you have that gut feeling, it proves to be the right thing to do. You can look back and say, I did the right thing at the time.
There were so many times of a career with my dad when, when machines come in and the engineer in him was the person that made the job stay.
Yep.
The businessman should have said, wish I'd never fucking seen this job, and sent it back from there on. And it's that, I've got so much of my dad in me that I still want to, I'm not going to get beat by that. But there's a little bit more Barry that sits on the back foot since he's passed away that says, do you know what?
Yeah.
I'm already been here 25 hours today,
Yep.
and there's only 24 in a day. I'm going to have to say no.
Yep.
But I think it's good that you've finally found your feet, and you've had such a diverse kind of, working from GYS and all the other places before that, landing on your feet at Bowler, and the positivity that comes from the conversation is really good to see.
Yep.
From a petrol head and a metal head.
Yep.
Favourite band of all time?
Favourite band of all time, Motley Crue.
Awesome. Do you know what I went
Just because it brings everything together, you know what I mean? And I don't think when you're driving down, in summer.
Tell me your favourite Motley. Yeah, come on.
You've got your sunnies on.
Yeah.
Window down.
Put them on for video. Come on, let's get them on. Let's get the Motley Crue.
I wish I'd not brought them in now. You've got your window down.
Yeah.
Motley Crue blasting.
I love it.
Does life get better than that?
Have you seen the Motley Crue tribute band that do the other band at the same time? They come from America.
I haven't, mate. No.
They played in Bradford a couple of years ago. They were great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Awesome band.
Yeah. This is it, and everyone wants to be in Motley Crue, don't they?
Yeah, I want to be in Motley Crue. In fact, I'm going to start a Motley Crue tribute right after this. I'm on drums and you're on guitar.
Yeah, you might need to buy a wig for it, mate.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's unfortunate, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the drawback to running your own business.
So, what car are you running now?
I've got a Golf.
Diesel or petrol?
It's petrol GTI.
Oh, nice. And what's your company van?
I'm driving a transporter, which I'm on my second now.
Right.
And I've got to say, I get it. When people talk about transporters being the best vans on the market, without a doubt.
Nice.
We were when the previous one that I had, I got it when I first started at Bowler. When it came up for renewal, my manager at the time, James, he gave me an option. He said, you can go into a car if you want, or stick with a van.
Right.
And honestly, looking at the cars, on the market versus the van, you just can't beat the transporters, can you? Especially in the line of work that we're in.
And it just needs a surfboard on top.
I'm working on that.
You're working on it?
Yeah.
What about one for the kids as well, and one for the missus? Let's get Paige surfing.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we can have like a proper annual welding holiday in Newquay, all of us every single year.
Well, instead of golfing, we'll go surfing.
Instead of golfing, like they all do. They didn't invite me on the 3M golfing day because I can't play golf. We could all go surfing.
Yeah, I could. Well, yeah, it depends what you're into, I guess.
Yeah, surfing.
I can think of things I'd enjoy more than golfing. So yeah,
I don't mind whacking balls really, really hard, like just whack.
Yeah.
But do you think you'll encourage your kids to come into it, learn a little bit more about
100%.
it? Yeah. Going to get a TIG welder for home.
I think all you've got to do, well, I've got a van full of equipment, mate, so, I just pull that out when I need it. But I think the key thing is, not to make a big deal about welding in particular, but I think it's about teaching kids as they grow up, that using your hands to build something or fix something is a good thing to do. It's something to enjoy.
And it's the feeling afterwards when you look at a project. I remember Gordon helped me with my first ever house. First ever property before he retired. He retired a secret millionaire. I don't tell everybody, but he did. He's just laughing at me there. But it's that standing back with the pride afterwards of doing the job. And it's every job. And a good tradesman, will always stand back. Doesn't matter what you do, stand back from your job afterwards and go, yeah, I'm proud of that. Like all the automation machines that my dad used to build. Yep. When he stood back afterwards, it was, yeah, I'm proud of that.
Yeah,
and then when he used to send me out and I'd tweak it and get the welds right and go, look at that part.
Yep.
And he'd say, I build it, Barry finishes it off then,
And it's something that, it's got to be embraced, that. I mean, I always remember when I first started on my apprenticeship, that first Christmas, started it sort of that summer. And I remember a load of my mates that I'd been to sixth form with, who'd gone to uni after. They were, up and down the country at different universities, and they all came home for Christmas. I remember going on a night out with them, and you're chatting away, and they asked me what I was doing with myself, assuming either that I'd gone to university or I was doing something else.
Right.
And I always remember that response I got when I told a couple of them that actually I'm serving an apprenticeship. I've got into welding, which, as somebody that had gone to sixth form and was studying English language, English literature, academic subjects, to turn to those people and say, actually, I've got into welding, it were almost a bit of a joke.
That's why your spelling's so good, isn't it, on your text messages?
Yeah, well, I put extra effort into it for you, mate. But yeah, you know, that response that I got, I'll never forget. It were almost as if, you know, why would you want to do that?
And that's a mindset
and it really
we need to get over.
With me, that.
Yeah.
But again, you know, it's a generational thing. And I think it's something that's often overlooked when you hear about people talking about needing to bring in more apprenticeships, you know, needing to get people into a more practical job. You've got to look at society as a whole, you know. You look at what people glorify and what people see as being successful.
Success.
I think that's changed over the years, hasn't it? You know, and again, you know, I go back to that point in my life when I was going through my apprenticeship and other people were either going to university or they're in college, whatever. What people glorified at the time is probably a bit different to now. It's not that long ago, but times have changed. And again, you go back further again, you know, society's changed. And I think what jobs and what sort of careers people choose to go into, it's a reflection of the world as a whole, you know. And
I think it's funny, the first ever experience I had when I went over to Spain with Oliver's mum before Oliver was born, there were some construction workers working on a construction site in the middle of Valencia, and they had a Murex 300 stick welder with a wind-up handle on the front.
Yep.
Hanging from a crane with some cables on at like 45 degrees. And, you know, the Spanish guys are like just laying a couple of rods, getting a little bit of a weld on, making do, getting it done. And for Oliver's mum, I don't think it was an option to have an apprenticeship. I think it was, you're going to go to uni and you're going to be a pharmacist.
Yep.
And she wanted to be an artist. And now it's a really bad thing to say, but I'm grateful for the fact that me and Oliver's mum are not together.
Yep.
Because of the fact that we can approach it from both different sides on an even keel. She can put her forward the university side, and I can say, well, look at what I've achieved and what I can do. Ultimately, he's also getting his own insight. Like, what do you want to do? I might just be a fighter. I think I want to fight for money for a bit. You know, he's incredibly capable.
Whatever he chooses to do, I think the key thing is, you know, there's no right or wrong decision.
Give him the tools, so our ability to be able to fulfill what he wants to do. The gym that he's fighting out of at the minute is going right back to the very beginning. The gym that he's fighting out at the minute is the building where Bernard started. On York Road.
Pretty incredible, that, isn't it? It's a small world.
And I wanted to start off today's conversation with the apprenticeship and where you started. I wanted to bring it right round to how you started there. Well, I know you didn't do any work there, but that's where Bernard
Same
was.
Business.
And I remember dropping stuff off to Bernard, like, you know, and having to phone him because the door was locked. And he'd come out and get the delivery. To meeting you at his other building and spending time, which is where our relationship started. And it's been a great relationship. And then walking into that gym 3 months ago with Oliver, and I'm sat there thinking, it's completely not the same place, but there's something familiar about this.
Been here before.
Wasn't a great feeling because I'd spent so much time recently up and down those roads going to the hospital to see Dad. And then it wasn't until my second visit, and I walked in with Oliver, and Oliver's like really keen for it by this time. I don't mind that it leaks in the corner. I don't mind that it smells a bit
it's
foisty.
all character in it.
And I'm like, this is where I met Bernard for the very first time. It's cool, mate. It's a good industry and it's got a lot to offer.
It has. It
and
really
people
has.
like you, Callum, Johnny, myself, a little bit older than you, but you know, Andy Lomax, I think we've got a really good industry ahead of us for at least another couple of 20, 30 years.
And I think what's important is that, you know, people understand that, you know, being younger guys in the industry, it's something to embrace. And what I mean by that is, you know, new technology, it's something that, you know, you speak to some of the older heads in the industry and they'll say, oh, well, you know, well, I didn't need that back in my day, you know. And
I had an L-Tech and you couldn't change amperage. It stayed at one amperage. I just did everything the same. I had to travel faster. I wanted less heat input. I travelled faster.
You know, and that's something that naturally, you know, some people glorify. But for me,
I had one setting with Tipex.
you know, it's something to embrace. You know, we're only going to be young guys in the industry once in our lives for a certain period, and I think during that period, you've got to embrace it.
Yeah,
you know,
and pass as much on to everybody else.
Fly the flag for buying into technology.
I agree,
because it's good for all of us.
Do you know we've been recording for 1 hour 22 minutes already?
Doesn't surprise me.
It's good, mate.
Surprise me, mate. I've got to be honest. When you first asked me if I were interested in coming in and doing this, my natural gut instinct is who would want to listen to me speak, because naturally that's just the way that's my inclination, you know. But I've enjoyed it. It's been good. The
one good thing from this that I'm taking from it is these conversations. I've kind of said we can't do more than an hour. Now we're going video podcast. It's got to be an hour, and it's just keeping me dad alive in the sense that people came here for the last 37 years. And were late for appointments, and missed business appointments, and were late on school runs because they get involved in conversations with my dad over that counter. And I remember when you used to come and pick stuff up for Bernard, and your dad was driving, and your dad would have to bip the horn because he'd already been here 30 minutes.
You'd come in to pick up a couple of sets that had been in for a service.
Yeah.
And an hour and a half later, you still stood chatting. Easily done with you and your dad. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's been great to have you on. I want you to come back on. That. I love the fact that you came with your glasses, which I'm going to have to go order a pair, because I just want a pair like that now.
And, you know, mate, I've got to be honest. People take the mick out of me for it.
I think I need to try them on.
I
need to just try them on.
I carry them with me everywhere.
I'm going to have to try these on. These are just like Weld like Bazza podcast. Gordon's getting up to go, but yeah, but they actually suit me.
They do suit you. Yeah.
The Weld like Bazza podcast. Thanks a lot, mate. It's been awesome.
My pleasure.
I'll get you on again. All right, buddy.
Sounds good.
This is the Weld like Bazza podcast.